on the 8th of May, 2026. And again, on May 22, the US government opened a file it had kept sealed for decades. Not a confession, not a conclusion, an evidence drop. Under the banner of Pursue, the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP encounters, officials did something unusual. They posted cases they still label unresolved, then effectively asked the public to help analyze them. That alone tells you what kind of story this is, not a story about certainty. A story about what happens when the record is real, but the explanation is not. And that shift matters, because disclosure is no longer just a matter of releasing old paper. It is a test of institutional credibility. The government is saying, in effect, here is what we can show you. Here is what we still cannot explain. And here is the rest we are not ready to claim. That is a very narrow statement. But in national security terms, it is enormous. It means the files are being treated less like mythology and more like unresolved intelligence. The record is drawing attention for a reason. The Pentagon says it has found no evidence these incidents are extraterrestrial. Yet it is releasing clips that, to any trained eye, demand serious scrutiny. Over Syria, over the Persian Gulf, near US and allied assets, near sensitive facilities. The question is not whether people want to believe. The question is what the sensors actually captured. The first tranche laid the foundation. The second made the case harder to ignore. More than 50 previously classified videos reportedly entered the public stream on May 22. Among them, one headline clip is labeled Syrian UAP Instant Acceleration, taken in 2021 on an infrared sensor and later uploaded to a classified network in 2024. In the footage, an object appears to move in a way that challenges ordinary interpretation. It does not drift, it does not loiter, it seems to jump. That matters because infrared footage is not the kind of evidence that should be easy to misread. These sensors are built for detection in darkness, heat, and distance. They are used because human eyes fail. So when the image still leaves analysts uncertain, the problem becomes more serious, not less. It is not enough to say the clip looks strange. The key question is whether the motion is a sensor illusion, a known platform, or a genuinely unresolved aerial event. Right now, the file does not tell us enough. Another release shows a Coast Guard infrared capture from April 2024. An object near a plane over the southeastern United States. Again, the issue is not spectacle, it is behavior. A modern sensor package designed to reduce ambiguity still leaves investigators with an object that cannot be confidently identified. Then there is the Persian Gulf file, where the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. A 2019 Middle East video reportedly shows 3 UAP flying in formation over the Gulf, likely recorded by an infrared sensor aboard a US military platform operating in the Central Command area. Separate footage from 2022 shows 4 objects moving near vessels off Iran. Different dates, different encounters, same core problem. The geography is important. These are not random sky stories pulled from anywhere. They are appearing in theaters where US forces watch hostile airspace, where shipping routes matter, and where every unidentified track can become an intelligence problem. If a platform over Syria records something it cannot classify, that is not a curiosity. It is a potential gap in situational awareness. And in a region defined by electronic warfare, surveillance, and contesting narratives, gaps are never trivial. What are these things doing in contested airspace? Why do they appear near military platforms and shipping lanes? And why, after all these years, do the answers still collapse into uncertainty? The May 22 release does something else, too. It reaches backward. Reuters reported a 116-page file on sightings and investigations at Sandia, the top-secret New Mexico facility, from 1948 to 1950. Inside were 209 reported green orbs, disks, and fireballs. Not folklore. Not rumor. A documented pattern around a sensitive site. That is where the investigation sharpens. Because once reports cluster around protected facilities, the question shifts. It is no longer only what was seen. It is why these events keep appearing, where secrecy, defense, and national security overlap. If you wanted an ordinary explanation, Sandia is not where you would want this trail to lead. There is another reason this matters. Files like these are not being released into a vacuum. They are being released into a public arena that already distrusts official silence. And the portal itself reflects that tension. Officials have called these unresolved cases and even invited private sector analysis, which is an unusual handoff. In practical terms, the government is saying it cannot close every file on its own. So the public is being asked to look, compare, and maybe find what institutions missed. That is accountability by diffusion. It is also a warning. And now the files are including testimony that used to circulate only in fragments. A senior US intelligence officer describes two large orbs flaring up beside a helicopter, orange with a white-yellow center, emitting light in every direction. According to the account, fighter jets were scrambled to identify them, and the crew was left virtually speechless. Then came the unsettling detail. The orbs seemed to be chasing the fighters. That is not internet mythology. That is written into a government file. There are also astronaut accounts in the record package. Scott Carpenter reportedly described particles around his capsule that looked like snowflakes. Apollo-era reports describe jagged particles in space. These accounts do not solve the mystery, and they should not be treated as proof of anything extraordinary by themselves. But they matter because they come from people trained to observe carefully, under pressure, in environments where error can be fatal. Still, credibility is not the same as closure. That is the tension at the center of this entire release. The Pentagon's own language matters here. Many of these materials, officials say, lack a substantiated chain of custody. In plain terms, that means an officially posted file is not automatically forensically complete proof. A clip can be authentic and still incomplete. A witness can be credible and still not have the full picture. A case can be real and remain unresolved. That is why this disclosure feels different from past waves of UAP chatter. It is not built on anonymous claims or recycled grainy videos alone. It is built on modern sensors, archived cases, intelligence reporting, and testimony from people inside the system. Yet even with all that, the most important conclusions remain out of reach. The portal has already drawn more than 1 billion hits. That is not just curiosity, that is public pressure. It is trust testing itself against secrecy. And it is a reminder that disclosure, once it becomes official, is never only about the objects in the sky. It is also about the institutions on the ground. deciding how much truth they can release without losing control of the narrative. So the files leave us with a disciplined conclusion. We can verify that something was recorded. We can verify that officials still cannot explain many of the incidents. We can verify that the evidence ranges from cockpit footage to intelligence testimony to decades-old site reports. What we cannot yet verify is the nature of the objects themselves. And that is where this case remains open. Download the May 8 and May 22 releases and cross-check the evidence yourself.